their remarks to matters contained in the bylaws, and it is my responsibility as chair of this meeting to do so. Those of you who wish to speak concerning the proposed bylaws are asked that you begin with your comments to council by clearly stating your name and address. You may then give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaws. Members of council may ask questions of you following your comments. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaws with individual citizens. Everyone who deems their interest in property to be affected shall be given the opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views known. Regardless of whether you favor or oppose any particular application or argument, please refrain from applause or other expressions of emotion. We don't really have the applause part issue at this meeting, since I would imagine you are all muted. But typically we do like people to refrain from that, just so that everybody feels comfortable speaking. Regardless of whether, restraint enables others whose views may not coincide with your own to exercise their right to express their views, and enable all views expressed to be heard as impartial a forum as possible. After this public hearing has concluded, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this public hearing. So, back up to the top of my agenda. Next, we will have a description of the application from our city clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The applicant, Mike Sutherland, is applying to amend the official community plan bylaw and the zoning bylaw to facilitate the use of the site at 2170 Mallory Drive for industrial purposes. The proposed bylaws are official community plan, amendment number 31, 2170 Mallory Drive, Sept Family Holdings, bylaw number 5009. The bylaw, if amended, will change the designation of the subject property from residential to industrial, as well as a map amendment identifying the subject property in the P1 institutional zone. Zoning bylaw map amendment number 40, 2170 Mallory Drive, Sept Family Holdings, bylaw number 5010. This bylaw, if amended, will rezone the subject property from P1 institutional zone to M1 light industrial. And zoning bylaw text amendment number T24, site-specific use P1 institutional, bylaw number 5011. The bylaw, if amended, will delete text from section 5.31.4D, site-specific uses table in the P1 institutional zone.
Thank you. And next we will have background information from the Manager of Planning.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen here. Looks like I should be able to. Hopefully you can see my screen. Can you see the presentation there?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So as the clerk just described, we have an OCP and zoning bylaw amendment this evening for discussion at 2170 Mallory Drive. So the city has received a development application to rezone the property from P1 institutional to M1 light industry and designate the property from residential to industrial in the official community plan. And this would also require that the property be included in development permit area number 3 for industrial properties. And then as a housekeeping amendment, we would also be removing site-specific uses for the property as well that had previously been permitted in the past, since they would be redundant with the M1 zone. The purpose of the rezoning is for the applicant to hopefully lease or sell the property by increasing the industrial potential of the property. So the subject property is located in the city's southern boundary that is shared with the Deschamps First Nation. It's a bit of an irregular shaped lot, about 2.67 acres in size. It's been used for a variety of commercial, institutional, or industrial uses in the past, and previously was occupied by Teleglobe Utility. This here is just an aerial overview of the site. The red lines there indicate the boundary of the property. You can see it's located again right adjacent to the Deschott First Nation boundary and close to Canal Beach and some other industrial properties there. Again, just a legal survey of the property showing you kind of the bounds and some of the legal aspects of the property. So as I mentioned, there's Canal Beach and waterfront industrial lands to the west of the property. It is also partially located within the tsunami inundation zone. The Cameron Heights neighborhood and the Neptune Shoreline Observatory are located to the east and northeast of the property. And that's so we'd say that the property kind of acts as a bit of a buffer area between some of the more heavier industrial uses and the residential properties. So it's a bit of a transition property, I guess you could say. And then again, as I mentioned, to the south is the municipal boundary that's shared with Deschott. And this again just shows some of the adjacent property boundaries in relation to the subject property. And this is just kind of a bit of a Google Street View of the property. So one road there kind of shows you leading down to Canal Beach, and then the other over to the left would show you to where the frontage of the property is. So in terms of the official community plan, there are a couple objectives that are demonstrated by this application to be consistent with the OCP, which is meant to guide our decisions on land use changes and land use considerations. So in terms of the OCP, we see that it's consistent in the sense that rezoning to industrial would encourage diversification and promote development of the industrial sector. It also helps the city provide a positive environment for industry and associated businesses. And moreover, it will accommodate industrial uses that primarily comprise of wholesaling, warehousing, manufacturing and processing, storage facilities, services and repair operations, and salvage operations. So those are all consistent with the OCP. In terms of the OCP, though, there are a few objectives that are not fully demonstrated by the application. One being that the property being discussed is not located within Port Alberni's industrial park, and that is something that the OCP states as an objective for where to consider industrial lands. And then also furthermore, the OCP encourages that future industrial areas should be located and considered next to existing uses that are consistent or compatible, so that to make sure that the area is harmonized and that it's not disruptive within the surrounding uses to help mitigate some of the impacts. So I think you can make a bit of a case either way that rezoning to industrial is compatible with some of the industrial lands nearby, but it's also not necessarily compatible with some of the residential uses or parks and open space uses nearby. To speak to that a little bit further, though, I guess I just want to provide a bit of information about the OCP designation around the industrial park. So just for context, the OCP is a little bit older. It's from 2007, and so doesn't necessarily reflect the current constraints on industrial lands. From conversations with our economic development manager, it seems that the city is quite constrained in terms of the scarcity of industrial land that's available. We're currently working with the ACRD on an industrial land inventory and action plan to identify kind of new policies or areas that could be considered for industrial uses in the future. And here as well is just a table that might be a little bit actually out of date now from when it was developed, but basically indicating that there's a large number of inquiries for industrial property that have been passed up because of a lack of availability for those types of uses in the community. And then again, in terms of, as I mentioned, the light industrial is compatible only with some of the adjacent uses. So again, you could really interpret it either way, that it either is partially compatible or is not at all compatible with the residential uses. That's really open for the interpretation of council and the community to really guide whether or not they think that's the direction that area is headed in. As well, we think that it's really important to acknowledge that the Deschott First Nation is potentially to be largely impacted by this because of the neighboring boundary there. And so we did provide some additional correspondence with the Tushot First Nation, inviting them to provide input on the rezoning application. Then in terms of the zoning bylaw, just to note, the subject property is zone P1 institutional, but the OCP designation currently is residential. So those two things are not actually compatible. And so this proposal would actually reclassify and realign that to be under an industrial use and an industrial designation. Moreover, kind of looking at the history of the property, the M1 light industry zone is consistent with most of the more recent uses of that property. Changing the zoning designation, we don't see as a huge discontinuation of the existing uses, but that being said, it doesn't push it towards a residential use in the future. So not maybe a huge disruption, but certainly not maybe a change if the vision for the community is to go towards residential in the future. In terms of the dimensions of the subject property, it meets the minimum lot area and requirements for the M1 zone, so no issues there with the zoning bylaw. In terms of site services, the site is serviced by water and sewer, and there are no storm connections available in the area. In terms of referral comments that were set out, the engineering and fire department provided some feedback, and all conditions that were requested of the applicant have been fulfilled at this point. So in conclusion, the applicant is looking to really to lease or sell the property by expanding the industrial uses of the site. All requested conditions have been met by the applicant. The planning department supports the proposed OCP and zoning amendments, but City Council should consider whether the proposed amendment is appropriate for the site and for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Solda, I did see your hand up. We have questions from council later in the process, unless you just have a comment about process. No, okay, we'll wait for that then. Thank you, Caitlin, for the report. City Clerk, has there been any correspondence?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was none attached to the agenda at the time of publishing the agenda. However, we do have one piece of late correspondence from Dana Walter, 2245 Mallory Drive. And she expresses concern about the rezoning of 2170 Mallory Drive and says, I feel if this land is rezoned to M1 light industry, that this will reduce my property value, increase noise, increase air pollution and traffic along Plywood Road and Mallory Drive. She also expressed concern that changing the zoning to M1 light industrial could bring businesses that should not be next to or in residential areas and parks, such as site-specific uses, medical marijuana facility. This correspondence was previously distributed to council earlier today as well. That's the only piece, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So next we will go to input from the public, and we will start with the applicant if the applicant has any comments that they would like to make.
There isn't anything specific that I have to say regarding the issue. The property has always been used for an industrial purpose. There hasn't been ever a time when it wasn't used for an industrial purpose, whether it was the cabling station, which is not residential, whether it was a heavy duty mechanic, which it was, whether it was a machine shop or woodworking facility. The use of that property has never changed ever since. I think it was because it was tied with the other property, the Neptune building, that really this property got kind of handcuffed with the institutional zoning. But the property, it has been and always will be industrial. As long as we own the property, we will never ever develop the property for residential. So it will stay industrial.
Thank you. And for input from the public, I will turn it over to the clerk to ask if we have anyone wanting to speak to the application.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we do have one registered speaker, and Al Shuish is queued up and ready to present to council now.
Thank you, Al, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I got a lot of issues with 2170 Mallory Drive. A history of that, my history that was given to me as a young man, that land was expropriated. And it was used strictly for telecommunication. At the completion of the expropriation, it was supposed to resort back to the First Nation for residential. I've asked my nation on numerous times, when did it get sold? Who bought it? How much was it sold for? And I just really concerned about the traffic control. You know, the amount of traffic that is going to, be light industrial, that is going to be coming around. I have 4 grandchildren down here. We have 4 dogs down here. The air quality, is all right. We are self-sufficient. We turn around and we live off wells. We have, and we pay our dues for hydro and all that. I just need some clarification on, maybe Madam Mayor can clarify for myself or past council members when this land got sold. My understanding of expropriated land is supposed to return back to the nation. And every time I asked my nation, they said they had no knowledge of it.
So I will just let you know that this land, to my knowledge, has not been owned by the city. So we didn't sell the land. I'm not sure. The applicant could probably comment on how long they have owned it specifically, but from the city's perspective, we wouldn't be able to comment on, it being expropriated or sold or anything like that, unfortunately, as it's an application that we're regulating for zoning, but it's not our land and wasn't by us.
Yes, I understand it's not the city land. Just that I feel that it just got slid under the table and nobody knew about it. I've talked to numerous people about expropriation land, and one being a lawyer, that it was supposed to come back to us, and there's no documentation of it being sold. So maybe the applicant can tell me if and when he purchased the land and who by.
Absolutely. I'll just go to the applicant if he has an answer for that.
Yeah, as far as I am aware of, the building was built in 1956. When it transferred from or whoever built it at that time, I don't know. We purchased the property, I believe it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I can't remember the exact date right now. But we did do 2 phase 1 environmental studies on the property, and with that there is a history that goes along with. That's what the environmental company does, and there is no research within that documentation or any research that I've been able to gather that indicates that this was expropriated land. I don't have any information regarding that as well.
Thank you. Al, did you have any other comments or questions you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just find it sort of strange. If the applicant, or I'll talk to my counsel and see when it was expropriated, because I just don't feel comfortable having a medical plant next to us. We have the buffer there. We're just concerned about the high traffic volume, if any. Heavy traffic, I don't know. If it's going to be products going to be sold out of the building, and what that's going to bring into the area. As you know yourself, Madam Mayor, we have problems down here with other activity that from Canal Beach, and we're constantly kicking them off. And if this building is put into a light industrial medical marijuana, then we as residents of Deepest, Polly's Point, will find that might create a problem for us, and there's no way we can keep the people out of here.
Thank you, Al. And I will just get the applicant to clarify, because at this point, I don't believe there's any plans for currently a marijuana facility. Just to clarify, Mike, if you can comment on the intended use or any plans to date.
Yeah, we have been approached in the past by parties interested in purchasing the property for cannabis production, but that has been off the table and not a consideration for, oh jeepers, since just shortly after when it went to council the very first time. That hasn't been long before COVID, even in January, I think it was. That hasn't even been a consideration. We are not currently in talks and will not be. So if it puts Al's mind at ease, that property will not be while it's in our ownership, a marijuana facility.
Thank you very much. I just feel that, maybe the alternative is to maybe try to sell it back to the nation so we can turn it into a residential area. I mean, I'm more than willing to back it if it comes back to that point where it does go back to us, which rightfully it should have back in the year 2003 when the expropriation, or 2006 when the expropriation was completed. It should have came back to us with no question.
Thank you, Al. I will go now to questions from council. And Al, if you do have other questions, once some of our questions are out, we will have another opportunity once council asks questions for you to ask final questions at the end. So if anything else comes to mind, just so you know, you will have another opportunity since you're our only guest today. So I will go.
That's okay. I feel like I'm the only one that really cares.
Oh, we appreciate you being here.
Madam Mayor, there is another person in the meeting who would like to ask a clarifying question,
Sure.
And that is Dana Walter.
Okay.
There we go. There we go. I'm just wondering, because in regards to the cannabis bylaw, is that under your, I guess under Mike Sutherland or the organization that he represents? Is that a bylaw that he has put forward?
No, so
Okay.
the city has a cannabis cultivation zoning. We are making changes to our industrial zone uses that are allowed to allow for cannabis cultivation. And we do have another public hearing coming up to talk broadly about that for community-wide cannabis cultivation. I believe that is next week. I will ask the city clerk to provide the date just so that you can be aware of that. But if we were to rezone this to light industrial, then cannabis cultivation would be a permitted use. What I'm hearing from the applicant is that that's not their intended use, but assuming this passed and then also the cannabis cultivation zoning passed, it would end up being a permitted use of that site.
Okay, so then can you explain to me if the bylaw doesn't, like if this rezoning gets changed and the cannabis bylaw does not pass, then how does it sit for site-specific uses on medical marijuana facility? How does that happen? If there's a chance where that particular building or location could be then used for a medical marijuana facility?
Sure, so I can ask the planner to comment on the process and some information on site-specific uses.
Yeah, Thanks. I don't believe that currently medical marijuana is a site-specific permitted use within the P1 institutional zone, but I'll have to grab my zoning bylaw. Just give me 1 second.
It does say site-specific uses in our light industrial zone, medical marijuana facility, but of course, medical marijuana facilities are not really a thing anymore, and that's all kind of changed. It's all recreational cannabis now, so that might be outdated.
And just to clarify, the site-specific uses within the M1 zone would be only relevant to the properties that have been permitted to have medical marijuana. So this property would not be one of those.
Thank you, Dana. Did you have any follow-up question?
No, thanks. Not at this time.
Okay, then we will go to questions from council. Councillors. I'll start with Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Solda and then Paulson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Caitlin, I would like to ask the manager of planning a question. She said that she did reach out to Shot First Nations, and I wonder if you received a reply from them about this rezoning application. If you did, what was their reply? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to just defer to CAO Ply since the letter did come from him. So I think he would probably have the best response.
Thank you, CAO.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, the city did send a letter to Sept First Nation, made them aware as a neighbor that this rezoning application was before council, and made them aware that if they wanted to engage with council either in favor or opposed to the application, they should make the city aware by today, and we've not heard from Sept from that either way. So I guess that's the short answer. There's been no response from Sept. I recognize that Mr. Shuish is a member of Sept, living on Teepus.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I was going to ask about the T-Shot too, regarding T-Shot. Is it possible to make a call, or is that not in protocol? I don't know. I just find sometimes T-Shot's really been really busy, and they might, I don't know, maybe they didn't get the letter. How do we know? You know, it's just our communication with the First Nations, and that I just think it's important that we have some kind of communication, although we tried.
CAO.
Madam Mayor, you'll recall, Madam Mayor, that you and I met with Chief Councillor Dick and a member of staff, and we touched on this topic and made them aware that they have received the letter.
Okay. Okay, and second, regarding the zoning, could we not add a covenant to it regarding the marijuana? And I'm just looking at, in the future, it could change. You know, we might not be building that now, but how about 5-10 years down the road? Could there not be a covenant added to this bylaw?
I think that would undermine the process that we're about to go
Okay.
through with our cannabis cultivation zoning, which we have taken significant community input on over the last few months. Well, prior to COVID, so I guess that's more than a few months ago now. But I think that to take a property that the proposal that we have in place, that we put in place, that our council decided on based on public input, and restrict cannabis cultivation where the bylaw that we're looking to put in place allows it, would kind of undermine our whole process that we went through, and we took significant public engagement on that. So I'm not sure maybe we could, but I'm not sure what message that would send about how legitimately we are following the public input and the process that we're about to go through. Of course, none of that is finalized yet because we have a public hearing and then council will have to discuss this again. Caitlin, is there
Point taken. Thank you.
about whether or not it would be possible to restrict it?
Yeah, it's certainly it is a possibility for sure, but I think your comments are well summarized, Mayor Minions.
Thank you. I will go to Councillor Paulson and then Washington and Corbeil.
I just want to go back a little bit to some of Al's comments, and in particular, with regards to expropriation of that property. The building was built in 1956. I would suspect that the expropriation of the property would have been prior to 1956. I guess my biggest concern is if there's some baggage attached to this property with regards to expropriation and its natural course of ownership and those sorts of things. I don't know how we could dig back in history on that, but if there's some sort of details attached to that expropriation that we're not aware of and that we should be aware of, maybe we should have a little historical on that. I don't want to affect the process as we're going through it here now or the timing, but the expropriation thing kind of is unusual, if you will, and I just wonder if we can get some history on it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to note that we do have to try as much as possible to stay within the fines of what this public hearing is about. And this public hearing is about, the intended use and the allowable uses and zoning of this property. So while expropriation is an important conversation, it isn't really about land use currently. So I think we do want to try to stay to, is this a permittable use in council's opinion for the property or not? On the expropriation question, there is, of course, there are processes to go through to answer those questions. And I don't think that this public hearing is necessarily where we're going to get that information. So we want to try to stay within the scope of what this public hearing is about, if possible. Councillor Washington.
My comments were about the expropriation as well. When Al was talking about it, my thoughts came to, I believe Teleglobe Canada was a Crown corporation, so there might have been some kind of deal there, but none of us were around in '56, so it's hard to say what the story is, but a little further investigation might not hurt. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted a little clarity from the manager of planning. One of the documents that was in our package that talks about light industrial has conditions of use. And it says nothing shall be done which is or will become an annoyance or a nuisance to the surrounding areas. And it talks about things such as emissions of odors, dust, fumes, smoke, vibration, et cetera, Does that go along with any of these rezonings, Caitlin? If this was to be rezoned, if there was a nuisance to any of the surrounding areas, would we have the ability to step in?
Yes, absolutely. So the zoning bylaw clearly creates a set of conditions for those uses to be permitted on the site, and the property, the building need to conform with that condition. So the city is absolutely able to enforce that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Manager of Planning, I have a question about development permit areas. I think in the report, and I might have misunderstood, but there was one area at the beginning of the report that said that currently with our policy, this wouldn't be a development permit area and they wouldn't require a development permit. And then later on, it sounded like they would. So because of course the development permit area process does add another level for council to review future projects, or applications that come forward. So if you could clarify that, that would be helpful. And it's possible I misread it.
Yep, sorry if there was some confusion with the way the report was written, but yes, absolutely, the property would be included in development permit area number 3. And so that does provide that extra level of oversight for the form and character of the property and ensuring that it's built to the high quality standards that the city anticipates for industrial development moving forward.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Other questions from council? Okay, seeing none. So as noted in my opening statements, council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing. In most cases, the report of this hearing will be presented to the next regular meeting of council, where council will decide whether or not to proceed with approving the application by way of passing further readings of the bylaw. Once this public hearing has terminated, members of council may not, as a group or as individuals, receive any further oral or written presentations on this matter, including what may be perceived of as informal discussions immediately after the termination of this meeting. I ask all parties to comply with this. Before closing the public hearing, I will call 3 further times for any further speakers on this matter, on the matters contained in the proposed bylaws. So for a first time, is there anyone who wishes to make a further representation? Al.
There.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know nothing about this technology stuff. I'm old school. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification to Councillor Corbeil and I can't even remember their names now because I played ball with Ron and Dyson or Doucette or whatever. I can't remember. But yes, the building apparently was built in 1956. But prior to that, it was a communication center that connected Port Alberni to Hawaii for WW2. It was, this is my history. Everybody will have different ones. So just to clarify on that, it was expropriated in 1953 prior to being constructed. It was a 50-year lease, and then turned around and expired, I believe, in 2003 or 2006. So that's history. And when they expropriated the land from our people, they put some people out of houses and moved them elsewhere that was not suitable for them. And when my late grandfather was alive, he said that it will revert back to us in around 2003, 2006, and that we will put it in industrial, or not industrial, residential, where it belongs. That's why I have a little feeling towards trying to get our land back. From expropriation land. That's my understanding, expropriated lands. When I talked to the lawyer that was doing the workshop for us, and I'll do some more soul searching to try and figure out when the land was sold. The Manson family purchased in 2016. So in that 10-year span, who did they purchase it off? That prior to that, who owned it? It should have been rightfully ours, but obviously somebody sold it under our eyes. So that's just an update on, or my knowledge of expropriation land. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate that background. I have a question for the manager of planning. One of the pieces of this that I'm struggling with is the official community plan change. I would like to see this property at some point in the future be residential, whatever that looks like. And I understand that maybe not today at this point, is there a market for that? But is it possible for us to, I think it is possible, but what would it look like if we were to, if we did consider approving the rezoning, but leaving the official community plan? I know it would be inconsistent, but it would still demonstrate that future intended purpose. Would something like that be possible?
I believe so. Yeah, I would have to confirm that though.
Thank you. Okay, I will call a second time for any further input on this matter. Okay, and we'll call, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just comment that, again, that this property always has been light industrial in all its uses. And up until now, I don't think that anybody would raise a flag saying that there's an excessive amount of traffic on Plywood Drive, which is the access to that property. No one uses the top access that goes past those in between the residential housing up above. That's closest to Dana's house and the lower houses. The pollution, again, this property is going to continue to be used as it always has, either as a mechanic shop or some type of industrial use. So if it's always been that way since approximately 1956, when it was a cabling station and then moved to industrial use all along, then you're really not going to see any change in either the pollution level or the noise pollution level or anything along that lines. This property will continue to be used as it always has been. So if someone has a problem with the property, or if there is issues with any type of noise or concerns that has been at the property, I would encourage them to come and talk to me. I'm definitely open to talk to anybody, but unfortunately, I think everybody would say that there isn't a squeak from the property. We keep a pretty tight rein on business. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we will call a third and final time for any further input on this matter. Okay, seeing none, there being no further speakers, I will declare this public hearing closed. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Madam Mayor, can we just have a motion to terminate the hearing?
Oh yes, we shouldn't be able to just declare it closed if we need a motion. It says right on my list. Moved by Councillor Kuhn and seconded by Councillor Washington. All in favor? Thank you. Carried.
Night, everybody.
Bye.